How's everyone doing? Are you still awake? Are you with me? So my name's Kouns. I'm with a company called Risk-Based Security. I'm excited to be here to talk about cyber insurance. How many people are excited about insurance? Some of you. I love it. I love it. I love that guy right there already. So many of you might have seen me speak before, but you don't recognize me because I used to look like this guy, right? And then I decided I wanted a little privacy in my life, so I grew a beard. Now no one knows who I am at all. So if you can grow a beard and you're looking for some privacy, it's a great thing to consider. So now I look like this guy, right? Now I've got the beard, although my wife does not like it one bit, not one bit. So I've been doing this stuff for a long time. I was in the security world, and then I actually made the move into the insurance world. What I do is we track vulnerabilities, we track data breaches, so we take a very risk-based approach, right? We named the company Risk-Based Security to try to figure out what's going on and how to take care of this stuff. But I did spend some time, quite a bit of time, at a cyber insurance carrier working on this stuff, so I'm able to give you sort of a behind-the-scenes background look. Now, I must say, I almost didn't make this conference because I'm a big Halloween fan, and I had a party that I had to go to with my wife ahead of time. So as much as she hated the beard, we actually did this because I had all kinds of people saying I look like Aquaman. Now, I tell them maybe Aquaman with no muscles, but that's okay. But very happy to be here. I think I'm actually going to be in the air flying more hours than I'm actually here spending with you guys, but I'm really excited to be here. One of the best conferences I've seen run. Kudos to Kana and the team. Really, really excited to be here. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about the state of security. So one of the things that we do is we track data breaches because we're trying to figure out just what's going on out there. And on the left-hand side, what you see is the number of worldwide data breaches that we've been able to figure out, right? This is the frequency, right? This is how often are these things occurring, okay? And on the right-hand side, this is the number of records exposed. While there's lots of things that go into a data breach, the number of records seems to be one of the biggest things when it comes to severity. What you can see is there's absolutely no slowdown going on right now, right? In fact, there's been over 43,000 data breaches that have been reported all time, and you can imagine there's probably a lot more that just haven't been discovered yet, right? When we actually looked at the mid-year, so we did a report of the mid-year analysis for 2019, what we found was pretty alarming, right? Over 3,800 unique data breaches have already been reported just through the mid-year of this year. And the number of records, 4.1 billion records, right? I mean, it's just amazing the amount of data that's being exposed. Now, when we compared that to the mid-year of 2018, what we found was the number of breaches is up by 54%, and the number of records exposed is up by 52%. So we're on track for yet another worst year ever, right? I feel like every time I'm traveling and I'm giving talks, I just keep saying, we're getting worse. We spend all this money on blinky little lights and boxes and security vendors, but we keep having data breaches and we're not getting better. So that leads the question of, as embarrassing as this is for us cybersecurity professionals, is it only a matter of when? Instead of will it happen or if, is it a ticking time bomb that a data breach, for the most part, is only the matter of when? Now, does a data breach cost money? Well, there's a lot of people out there that'll debate about how much it does cost per record, all those sorts of things. I'm not trying to get into that debate whatsoever. But what I will say is, yes, if you have a data breach at your organization, it's going to cost you money, right? So here we're saying that it's pretty much going to happen to you. It's not great, but it's a good chance that you're going to have a data breach at your organization, and it's going to cost you money. So let's talk a little bit about risk management and insurance. There are 4 things that we can do with risk. Whether you've been in the security industry for a long time or you're new, right? We talk about risk because that's what we're here to do, right? So there's 4 things we can do. The first thing that we can do is we can avoid it. If we can avoid risk, that's great. That's the best. But in the case that we can't, where there's something that we need to do, there's a business project or something that needs to happen, then we want to say, okay, let's mitigate things, right? Let's put in some controls and try to reduce the risks and make it a little bit more reasonable. Now, in some cases, the business project or decision says, I don't really care about you security nerds, right? We need to do this, so we're going to accept the risk. It's okay. This is such a good thing. We understand, but we're going to move forward with it. But believe it or not, there is a fourth thing that you can do with risk called transfer. We have been trained on this from the very beginning, yet for some reason, every time we talk about risk transfer, security people's eyes start twitching and they don't like it. But there is this concept of risk transfer, okay? So when we think about transferring risk, what can we do? Well, the first one is outsourcing, right? If we're not so good at doing something, we could outsource it to someone else, and then they can assume some of that risk. There's definitely contracts and agreements, right? We could write a contract where risk is transferred. And then we do have this concept of insurance. Now, why would you purchase insurance? And don't even think about cyber insurance, but just in general insurance, right? Number of reasons. Reduce your liability, loss recovery, legal requirements. Maybe legally you need to. And in some cases, you just get insurance because you want a peace of mind. You want to be able to put your head on the pillow at night, go to sleep, and know that if anything goes wrong, it's okay, right? And insurance typically is purchased for your most valuable assets, right? You're not going to get insurance for something that doesn't have much worth. Lots of insurance coverage out there. You can insure buildings and people and fancy yachts, medical, electronics. There's even insurance if you're going to go on a nice trip or a vacation. You've been working hard, you want to go on a trip, and you just want to make sure there's no storms or something could go bad. You can get insurance in case it goes wrong. They even sell event insurance, where maybe you're planning a big special day, whether it's a conference or a wedding, and it rains on that wedding and causes problems. You can get insurance for that, believe it or not. Ever been traveling? You go to get a rental car, and they say, hey, you want some insurance? And you're not quite sure if you should say yes or not, right? There's even insurance out there called umbrella insurance, where we're just not quite sure what you need coverage for, so we're going to cover lots of things. Only reason I bring this up is all of these insurance coverages are very accepted. People agree with this, makes sense. But then when we talk about cyber insurance, people don't like it. But when you think about it, your most valuable asset right now is data, right? Data and systems and all these sorts of things is valuable, but yet we're not quite there yet in the acceptance rate. So why do people hate, also known as, why haven't more people or organizations bought cyber insurance yet? They think they have unbreakable security controls. Who in the audience will raise their hand do you think your organization has unbreakable security controls? I hope no one raises their hand, right? So no unbreakable Oracle buses out there. It's great to see. You think the coverage maybe won't last, maybe it won't respond. I hear that all the time. I understand that. Don't believe it's a good spend of budget. They're not aware of the market. Something else? And maybe just don't quite understand it. So when I was in security and then I first went into the insurance world, all of my friends thought I had lost my mind, that I was ruining my career, that I was turning into a used car salesman trying to sell insurance, and it was horrible. What was I doing, right? And I understand that because in many ways there's a bad reputation, right, with insurance. I think if you think about your personal involvement, maybe there was that one time where something happened and the insurance company wasn't as fast or didn't help you or didn't do the things you wanted to do. But on the flip side, I think if you think about the times in your life when insurance was there for you, you may think, hey, this was there for me, it was a good thing. But right now, cyber insurance is getting a lot of negative attention. Anytime there is an issue with something going on, it's in the press about how bad it is, right? And in some cases, I get it. There's some question marks as it's growing. In other cases, it's really cut and dry, like they didn't have cyber insurance, so they didn't have cyber cover, right? They were trying to get it underneath a general liability policy or something else. So I think most situations that I have seen, they appear to have a let's call it a valid reason, whether you like it or not. But there have been a few situations, and some here recently, that have presented a concern that we need to watch as this continues to evolve. Okay, many names, many carriers. It's for those that don't like the word cyber, I think I've gotten over it. The word is cyber. We're okay with it. You'll hear it cyber insurance, cyber liability. There are some cases from time to time where you'll hear it called other things like internet or data privacy insurance, things like that. The key point here is that there is little commonality, very little commonality between them, okay? Now, when you think about a cyber insurance policy and you maybe want to compare it to your own life, insurance that you're used to, there are some similarities, but in lots of cases, it's not the same thing. But what I want you to understand are two sort of concepts. It's called first party and third party, okay? So first party, this is when the insurance will pay to fix things that we own, okay? And third party is when we pay others for our actions, or believe it or not, our inactions, when we didn't do something that we should have because we've caused harm, okay? This is important to think about as you think about a security event, right? Including a data breach or a compromise. So to make it a little simpler, here on the left, you see the tree falls on our car, right? We're getting paid because our car was damaged, right? First party. See in the other picture, right? We crash our car into someone else. We have to now pay because we caused damage to them, third party. Why does this matter? It matters because organizations can get a policy, a cyber insurance policy that can cover both, okay? Security events, data breach recovery costs, but also protection out of lawsuits that may arise out of a data compromise. So it's very important when you think about this to think about the type of events that your organization may face so you can determine what type of coverage you may want. You can see a bit more specifically in here, right? Forensics, legal fees, maybe mailings, credit monitoring, all those things could be covered, right? Liability, defense costs, settlements, all sorts of things. But there's lots of other coverages too, a lot of other first-party coverage. System restoration, getting you back up and running, the extra expense you may incur to get back up and running, and even payment of extortion demands, ransomware, right? Ransomware is a big thing going on here. And also even, believe it or not, lost business, lost revenues, lots of things that you can get coverage for. I feel like I've said this at least once, and I'm hoping I'm going to say it multiple times. Not all cyber insurance policies are the same. They're not all the same. So if anyone broad brushes cyber insurance, you know they probably don't know what they're talking about because not all policies are the same. Now, as helpful as some of these policies can be, you got to think of some things that won't be covered, okay? Reputation damage. While this may be a really big thing and important to people, you're not going to easily find coverage out there that says, there was a data breach, your brand's been damaged, here's some money for that, okay? Now, there are services like PR firms and crisis management and things like that, sure, but not much. Regular maintenance, upgrades, fixes. This one took me a bit to get my head wrapped around. But if you think about it, insurance is there to make you whole, right? To get you back to where you were. So if you had some old system that you didn't maintain, some old phone system that was horrible, you didn't maintain, and you have a compromise through there, they're not going to come in and say, hey, here's this brand new VoIP system for you, shiny, right? If you have a car crash, they're going to get you back into your similar car. They're not going to show up and say, here's a Ferrari for you, right? So you have to think about that. Now, in some ways, it's a little confusing because they're not going to put you back to where you could get maybe hacked again, right? So you have to look at it. Economic value of data, right? If you have a confidential business plan or you have some sort of secret ingredient formula or something, it's hard to find coverage for that, right? In other cases too, while you can get coverage for this, you have to think about data in the care of someone else, okay? If they're evaluating you and your security and you just start throwing your information around a whole bunch of other vendors and people, it can be tough. You got to be careful. Now, there are some not so common exclusions, ones that I want you to be careful about. Failure to encrypt data, right? So think about this. You have a laptop that goes missing, right? And it wasn't encrypted, and your insurance policy says, whoops, you didn't encrypt, no coverage. That's a bad one. If you see that, you don't want that on there, okay? Failure to maintain or take reasonable steps to maintain security. If you ever see this in an insurance policy, run. This is horrible, right? Who could not make everyone look bad that you're not doing the right things, okay? Sometimes they'll try to limit coverage. The reason why insurance carriers do exclusions is they're not entirely sure what it's going to cost them or how bad things are. They're trying to learn what the market looks like. So what they'll do sometimes is they'll put exclusions in, or even sometimes they'll sublimit, take the amount of money that you can get and put it down in the wording, okay? Sometimes you'll see things like failure to comply with PCI standards, right? The PCI credit card data standards, they'll say, oh, if you're not in compliance with that, then you don't get anything, right? These are all things that you want to make sure you don't find in there. Now, there are some other ones that may be okay. Business income loss. It is possible to get coverage where if you go down, you have some sort of maybe denial of service or a breach that takes your system down, they can actually say, hey, you've lost money, right? And we'll look at that and we can get you reimbursed for things. If you get a policy like that, it may cost you more money. It may be not something that you care about, so you may be okay if it's excluded. But you may want it in there, so you want to be careful. And the other one down there that I put there is called contingent business interruption. One of the things the insurance carriers are worried about right now are not so much an individual data breach. A lot of these carriers are handling between 3 and 5 data breaches a day. They're not worried about maybe 1 or 2 here. They're worried about large events. They're worried about some sort of event that could cause thousands of claims to all come in at the same time. So something like contingent business interruption, which would mean someone else went down and now we're down, maybe cloud services, internet, the grid, right? You can see in some cases they'll try to protect themselves from that. So these are not so common ones that you want to look at and see if it makes sense to you or get them out of there altogether. Not all insurance policies are the same, right? It means you actually have to read the policy. You have to read the thing. And if you can't be bothered or you don't want to do that, hire someone to do it for you. There are these things called brokers out there that their whole job is to understand what carriers and cyber insurance is available, and they could work with you to see what you need, okay? So integration of cyber liability insurance. In my view, and everyone that I've worked with, executives understand risk. They understand risk. They may not understand all the security nerd stuff we talk about, but they understand risk. They understand the avoid, mitigate, accept, and transfers, okay? Organizations are already protecting their important assets, and they're already transferring risk, right? Almost every company that you guys work for are insuring property, buildings, casualty coverage for accidents, what's called EPLI, or employment practices liability, cover people, right? And even this thing called technology E&O, errors and omissions, to make sure that the services you provide, you're providing them properly. And in case you don't do a good job, there can be coverage, okay? Now, for me, a lot of cybersecurity people are still chasing this perfect security notion that we're going to get everything locked down perfectly, right? But the reality is there's this law of diminishing returns. When you start working on security, an investment into security, whether it's just better processes, more people, tools, technology, you can make some very meaningful jumps to improve. But at some point, spending a lot of money doesn't move things as far as you would like. And we start to get into this concept of maybe trying to find optimal security, right? We're spending so much more money. What is it going to do to move things? But the problem is there's still risks, there's still gaps, right? And this is where insurance and transferring risk can really come into play. So integrating insurance. So we're going to do this in US dollars. So I apologize for you having to do the translation conversion here. But let's think about it just for a small business, right? Small business. Let's estimate that the small business has approximately US dollars 2 to 5 million in revenue. Okay, pretty good business, not bad. And if we say to them, you need to care about security, because everyone needs to care about security, right? It doesn't matter what size you are, security is important. So you need security staff, right? And just can't have one, you gotta have lots of security people, right? Okay? You need to buy security software and hardware. And it's just not one thing. You need to buy antivirus, encryption, firewalls, IDS, compliance. You need to buy all these things, right? Lots of things in security we need. And then you can't just do it yourself. You need external third-party validation, right? So now we need security consultants to do vuln scans and pen tests and all these things. So if we're telling a small business they need to get involved and get good at security, we're telling them they need to do a lot of things. And so if you think about that, for the sake of just an argument, let's say it costs that same business, right? They're making $2 to $5 million a year in revenues. Let's say they spend approximately $200,000 per year on security. And for the sake of this, let's just say that that's not even the initial cost, because we know it'd be a heck of a lot more based on the cost from what vendors are providing for security tools. This estimate is very low. It's very low. Should they be spending more? Probably. But how much? And by the way, if they spend more and more and more, does this mean they're not going to have a data breach? Here's what's interesting. Typical costs for cyber insurance right now are extremely reasonable, also known as, I can't believe it's this cheap. Very, very cheap right now. Minimum premiums, a premium is what you pay to get a policy, can be around $1,000 and you can get $1 million in coverage. $1,000 will get you $1 million in coverage. Now, what's also interesting is these carriers, they don't want claims. They don't want to lose $1 million. So they're actually providing risk management services for free to companies, trying to get them better at security so they don't have potentially a big claim. Now, pricing can be very different based on industry and controls, okay? So there are some industries that are deemed higher risk, or you'll hear it called higher hazards, and so maybe you're not going to get $1,000, right? And in some cases, there are industries where the insurance folks have said, we just don't even want to touch that industry, okay? So it varies. But if we think about it, many smaller companies right now, they don't understand security. They're not at conferences like this. They're not able to spend, and in many cases, they're not doing anything, okay? Now, larger organizations can also get cyber insurance. This isn't just a SME conversation. If we were to estimate a large hospital, for example, right, we could say $2 billion in US dollars in revenues. I'd say good chance for $1 million in coverage, around 100,000 US dollars. And if they wanted $5 million in coverage, probably about $200,000. What that means is it isn't $100,000 per every million, right? As you get more, you don't have to pay the same amount. Now, what's also really interesting is there are a lot of insurance carriers out there. There are hundreds of them in the marketplaces. Now, depending on locations and what they want to do, it can vary who's available for it. But there are certain carriers out there that can write up to $250 million US dollars by themselves. And if you need more than that, they have this concept of creating towers. And other carriers can come in together and do this thing called excess, where they can get limits all the way up to $750 million US dollars. That's a pretty big tower that you can get for this stuff. Now, so far, what I've seen, larger organizations don't care about risk management services like the smaller businesses do. But the good news is they can utilize the service rates of the carriers, and we'll talk about that here shortly. Say it with me. Not all cyber insurance policies are the same. And by the way, they're not all priced the same either. So you need to shop around, right? You need to look around to see what makes sense, carrier, getting the right coverage, and what prices may be available. So despite the limitations, and there are some, okay? I'm not going to tell you that everything in the cyber insurance world is perfect. But despite the limitations, there's some real value in these policies. There's some real value in there. Now, interest is on the rise. For a long time, when I was chatting about cyber insurance, no one wanted to talk about it, right? It's a real testament to the whole conference here at Code Blue that I'm actually here speaking to you about this. Insurance is something that we need to start taking seriously. Now, that being said, just like I told you earlier, anytime something goes wrong, the media is all over it. So just a day or so ago, right, there's an article about AIGs backing away from coverage, right? The whole situation where they're not wanting to pay because there's some definitions of how the crime occurred, okay? Another one that was just sent to me here saying cyber insurance has paid just a fraction. They paid just a fraction of the breach-related costs so far. Now, what's interesting is when you read that, immediately the headline makes you think, oh man, this cyber insurance stuff, it's horrible. But when you read on the left-hand side, which is about the article, which they basically said, look, insurance payout only about 6% of the $60 million it cost, right? But if you actually read what the company itself put out, they've basically said, yes, this is what insurance has done so far, and we further think more compensation is going to happen, but we want to make sure it's confirmed. So we don't know what's going to happen yet, but the article makes it sound like insurance was horrible, but the reality is it's still playing itself out to see what will be covered. Twitter's a funny place. I get a lot of hate tweets at me about cyber insurance all the time. But a lot of people will particularly say, cyber insurance isn't going to save you, it's horrible, and then people jump in all the time saying, they don't pay claims, they'll never cover you, right? That's the constant thing of, they're never going to pay anything, right? But what's interesting is, I know a lot of insurance carriers, they pay claims. If they weren't paying claims, people wouldn't be getting this stuff, okay? So there's a concern, and I understand. And there's some cases that come up that are not as clear as we would like. But even here, this is an article that came out from the Association of the British Insurance, where they were looking at claims in the UK. And there was a small sample size. It was only 207 claims that they looked at. But what they found was that 99% of the claims were paid. So statistics, love them or hate them. But what I can tell you is what I've seen, if you have the right policy and you have the right carrier, they're paying claims. Okay, so love it or hate it, what do you need to know? For the most part, I'd say a lot of you have been giving me smiles, some of you are giving me the looks that you don't like insurance, and that's totally okay. And I really, at this point, I don't care if you think it's great or you hate it, but there are some things that I want you to leave here today knowing. First of all, I believe if your organization doesn't have cyber insurance now, it's going to pretty soon, whether you like it or not. Okay? Professionals and responders, if you're in any sort of incident response, a lot of this message is for you. I want you to be very clear on what's going on here. But I want you involved. I want you to fill out the applications. If your company already has insurance, which maybe they will, usually that insurance is purchased outside of IT. So they may be purchasing the wrong coverage. They may be with not a great carrier. They may not know these things that you can help with, okay? So help fill out the questionnaires, help figuring out what what you'll be covered with, and know what will be covered. But the most important thing is there are requirements that a cyber insurance policy puts in place that you need to definitely follow. Otherwise, the insurance will be nullified, okay? I tell a lot of people sometimes these aren't the incident response processes that you're looking for. You may not like this, okay? So most companies thus far have focused on creating their own incident management processes, creating the ability to respond to things, right? Some of you in the room have unfortunately had the opportunity to actually respond to an incident, right? But with insurance, there are several things in the process that might have to change, okay? Much of it is based on the carrier and policy, which is why it's important you figure out if you have one. The claims process is much like a normal personal insurance policy, what you've experienced on your own. You have some sort of problem, you got to call the insurance company and file a claim. You got to tell them about it, right? From there, they're going to assign what's called a claims adjuster, someone that will help you through the process. And then based on your situation in the claim, it'll take several passes, right? Lots of different ways it could go. Now, almost all of these policies have requirements about timely reporting. Some will say 30 days, 60 days. Some will say as soon as practical. But they're basically saying, we want you to tell us as soon as possible. and you can understand that, right? They don't want a data breach or something bad to happen, and then like months and months or years later you call and say, yeah, this bad thing happened, right? Carriers don't want that. They want to get involved as soon as possible so that they can help you respond. They can help keep those things under control and help you out, okay? Now, if you don't tell the insurance carrier quick enough, they could come back to you and say, sorry, you didn't tell us. The contract, the insurance policy said you got to tell us within this time frame. Now, there are also a lot of concerns about what's called over-reporting. So if you think about every single little thing that happened to your company security related, that's a lot of stuff, right? And if you told the insurance carrier about every single one, that may make the insurance carrier go, oh my goodness, what's happened at this company? Right? Maybe we shouldn't give them insurance, or let's up their rates. Okay? So the people are concerned about that. What I would say to you is that you don't need to tell them about every little time you think something's going on. But if you think you have some sort of potential larger issue or data breach, it's best to report it to them. Best to report as soon as possible. Now, insurance pays in two different ways. Okay? What's called pay on behalf, and the other one is called reimbursement. Now, pay on behalf, this is more common these days, okay? This is basically saying the insurance carrier has providers. They're going to contract them with it, whether it's forensics, legal, whatever it may be. They're going to do that, and they're just going to pay those vendors directly. Now, what's a concern about this is that in some cases you lose control of the process, and you can lose control of some of the vendors. So if you have vendors that you're working with that you like, the insurance carrier may select someone else to do forensics, some other lawyer, okay? So this is something you need to be mindful of. Now, the reimbursement aspect, basically, I see less insurance policies doing it these days. They'll say, yeah, you go hire the vendors and find the people you want to fix things, and then we'll pay you back, okay? And there are some other situations, depending on the policy, where reimbursement can come in at a later time. So what do you need to know? You need to know there's this thing called a panel. There's panels. And what's happening is insurance carriers want to keep the prices low of a data breach, right? They want to keep the prices down, and they want to respond to them properly. But one of the things that they do is they create these panels for legal folks, security vendors, forensics, notification, monitoring, even proactive services. And they go to these vendors and they say, hey, we're going to have a lot of claims coming in. We're going to have a lot of business, but I want your best rate. And if you have a right service, you're good at what you do, and I can negotiate a good rate, then I'm going to send you all this work. And so they negotiate prices low. Now, this is a really, really good thing that I want everyone to think about. If your organization had a data breach and you needed to get some external vendors in to help, and you call up, is the first thing you're going to say, hey, let's negotiate price, or are you going to say, get here immediately, I need help? Right? It's the worst time to negotiate rates when you're trying to get someone to come help you respond to something right away. So this is a really good thing. It makes the insurance dollars stretch farther, but not only that, I tell companies all the time, even if you got a smaller amount of insurance, and let's say you needed a lot more, you can still use their services and those rates. So it's a really good thing. But it can be a huge concern for you, again, if you have these preferred vendors that you want to work with. One of the things that you can do, though, as you look at insurance carriers, ask her who on their panels, and if you really want someone in particular, and you might be able to say, what about these folks? Can they get on there? Okay? Risk management services. Risk management services are really interesting. They're also being called right now a lot of times a breach coach, okay? And so effectively, some carriers will set up these portals as a way to triage an incident, right? So it may require that you log into this portal, you may have to input something, or in some cases, you may have to call a breach coach and have a conversation with them, and they'll ask questions about what's going on to try to determine, is this really serious? Is this not? Are you overreacting? Whatever it may be. The most important thing here is for small to medium businesses, this is really good. This is a great way for people to be able to call up and say, hey, I might have a situation. For larger organizations, yeah, they may still use that, but in many cases, it may be the way you need to report the claim. So know the process before you need to use it is the message. Quick response. With the rise of cyber insurance, it's clear that responders just need to know how this impacts them, right? I think traditionally, every organization has had a focus just to respond as quick as possible and try to do everything that you can get things under control. I think this is still generally the right thing to do, but don't forget about that notification of claim. It has to happen basically at the same time. If you start going down a path, making all kinds of other decisions, and the insurance carrier doesn't like it, it can be a problem, right? It can be a real problem. All right, cyber insurance in Japan. So cyber insurance, for the most part, has been primarily talked about in the context of the United States. That is true. There is a lot of other activity out it, but you're mostly hearing about US sort of conversation. However, cyber insurance is available and it's growing in the whole Asia-Pacific region. There hasn't been as much information that's come out really outside of the US in terms of specific claims and causes of loss and industries that are impacted. So we're still operating on with not as much data as we would prefer. But when I took a look quickly at all the data breaches going on, I said, let's see what's going on in Japan, right? We're aware of 215 breaches that have occurred, right? So there are breaches. There may be more that maybe we just couldn't translate and figure out what was going on. And over 176 million records have been lost, right? So there's definitely, this isn't just data breaches happen in the US kind of thing. Now, when we look at also specifically for data breaches in Japan, we can see when you look at sort of business groups as well as economic sectors, there's no one immune right now, right? This isn't like, just those big tech companies, they're the only ones that have the problem. That's not the case, right? We're seeing it across all types of organizations, revenue size, et cetera. And what's really interesting is when you look at some of this, you can see the average records loss over 800,000, a lot of hacking, but not just hacking, right? We're seeing companies exposing things on the web where they shouldn't, fraud and social engineering, among other things that are leading to this. Now, for me, one of the things that I found really interesting was the acknowledgement that small to medium businesses don't understand this stuff and need help. And so saw some work that came out in June saying that trying to get people together to figure out how can we improve small to medium businesses. I've also seen reports from 2017 saying, hey, as the security problems and threats continue to increase here, policies are growing. And you can see year over year some data that's coming out about cyber insurance premiums within Japan that's growing. I think also what's going on is the whole region, but Japan specifically, has been seen as a place that has more and more threats coming, and that they're going to see cyber insurance grow in this area without a doubt. All right, so as we wrap down, what are some actions? First thing, I want you to continue to invest into security. Security is important. I want you to continue to work on it. We don't want what's called a moral hazard, right? That's where you say, wait a second, Jake just said this stuff's really cheap, and why don't I just get insurance and stop doing security? No, we don't want that, okay? Continue to invest into security as it makes sense and where it is appropriate. We want you to define a response plan in case of a data breach. Understand your exposures, your data stored, how much records. These are all things that you need to do. But what I'd also like you to do is go find out if you have insurance. When you get back, start asking the questions. Do we have insurance? You need to know for all the reasons that we talked about. Now, if you find out that you don't have insurance, then I'd like you to have a conversation with your executives, with management, and say, should we get coverage? What kind of coverage should we get? How much limit should we get? And get a quote. See what it would cost you. And if it makes sense, great, integrate it as a part of. It is not the only thing, but as a part of. So think about this. Effective security programs cost money, yet they can still be compromised. Cyber insurance is pretty affordable, much more affordable than security solutions. So while there can be some gotchas, if you're a CISO or you're in charge of security and you had a data breach, what do you want to say? Whoops, sorry, I thought we were unbreakable? Or do you want to say, hey, we have a partner, let's file a claim? I'd like you to be open to the idea that cyber insurance does have a valid place. I'd like you, instead of being quick just to pick all the negative things out, look for some of the positives, especially when you're talking to smaller organizations. If you're saying that it's horrible, then maybe they won't do it, and I think smaller organizations it can be a big deal for them. And for larger companies, think of your supply chain. This is a great way to help them improve security, okay? So there's a clear need for organizations to develop an incident response plan. We know that. Have that plan prior to needing to use it. But those breach services, again, carriers are handling 3 to 5 claims per day. They're good at this. They've been through this. They know how to get through these things. There's some real value there. And in some cases, some of those smaller companies, they just want the Ghostbusters, who are you going to call? When something goes wrong, they just want to call someone to say, come help me, okay? So with that, I have jammed in a lot of information. I greatly appreciate you listening. I think I've completely run out of time for any questions. So I'm going to say thank you. I will definitely stick around. And if there's anything you want to talk about, please let me know. Thank you very much.